Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Byword Show. I'm so glad you're here today. We've got an exciting episode for us here. We've got Kait Streit with us, and you may know her as the MELLOW Mama on Instagram or TikTok, but she has got so much wisdom to share with us for the mamas who are listening or those who are approaching the parenting season, just want to learn more. And I'm just really excited to have her here. So, Kait, thank you so much for being here. Would you just tell everybody a little bit about who you are, what you do, and your story?
Yes, I would love to. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to share. This is like my deepest passion and the most fulfilling thing for me in life. So I love getting any opportunity to express, what I think is the most helpful tool set. So to start off, first of all, I'm a mom. I've got two babies. I've got one who's almost 6 and one who's 10 months old now. And I think my story, starts really with my first pregnancy, just doing a lot of research like most moms do. Primarily, it started with kind of trying to navigate a more holistic birth experience, and then that trickling into discovering a lot of different work in regard to child psychology, human psychology, and relationships, how to build healthy relationships, and start to regard the parent-child relationship as exactly that. So basically, the work that I was finding was really uncommon. It's not stuff that you could find on a regular old Barnes and Noble shelf or even like a library. Honestly, a lot of the most popular work that I saw was actually pretty counterintuitive to the work that was really making me feel very confident about the kind of parent I would want to be once my baby was born, as well as the work that I was doing in the meantime, while he was in my belly, to set myself up for success as a new parent. So I was like, I should develop a resource like a one-stop shop through maybe YouTube, because I had experience being on camera for parents and expecting parents and people to do the work that I'm doing, and also just to make it more accessible and more available to them, because it can be very overwhelming. And I know we talked about this when we spoke previously, that there's just so much information when it comes to raising children and becoming a parent. And so many people will also tell you the opposite. They'll say there's no information out there. There's no rule book. There's no handbook. It's just you got to fly by the seat of your pants, or whatever the expression is.
Right.
And I was like, that's just not true. I remember in my pregnancy, in fact, someone saying that to me in Target. He was like so sweet, little old man, but he was like, there's no handbook for that. And I was like, actually, I've read about 62 books at this point. I feel pretty confident that there actually is a lot of very great material out there. But I just was like, man, I want to make one-stop shop for parents, so that this process can be easy for them to decipher. I'm all about parents not necessarily outsourcing, like getting in tune with their own innate wisdom as parents. And I think that the work that I share allows that to happen in a very like hands-off, objective way. So basically that turned into something that I really never thought would happen. Like I really didn't anticipate developing any following because parenting is already so deeply sensitive and personal. And then of course I'm sharing things that feel controversial and backwards. So, and quite frankly, triggering to a lot of people. So I was shocked to see that it resonated with so many people, just like it did with me. And that turned into me coaching parents one-on-one, and obviously developing my course and all kinds of other material and resources that I'm just so passionate about.
That's amazing. And like you said, parenting is overwhelming on its own without any advice from anybody else at all. And then there's just so many voices saying, oh, you should do this, or you need to do this, or if you do this, it's going to ruin your child, or, all of these things. And it's just so hard. I feel like, especially as a new mom, it's like, okay, I mean, I can learn from my parents. That's my experience, but there are things I want to do differently. But what does this look like? And then also the piece of just being in tune with yourself. And so that's why I love what you talk about so much, because, conscious parenting, it is such a different approach. And it's just really special. I love that it really is about the parent and the child relationship. And so for those who aren't familiar, would you just kind of break down what conscious parenting is and maybe what the difference is between that and other approaches that people may know?
Yeah, I would love to. I like to preface this part of the conversation with the fact that in child psychology and human psychology, typically the physicians and experts that write books on the subject will say that there are four options when it comes to parenting. There is the warm side and the cold side: warmly authoritarian, warmly passive, coldly authoritarian, and coldly passive. I'll start with what I guess would be the saddest side of that little square. So, coldly passive would be the neglectful parent that has to prioritize their own needs over the well being and needs of their children. This is a pretty obvious one. You can think of different scenarios that would lead to this circumstance. It's incredibly unfortunate, but I find that the average parent is actually really not operating in this space, although different life circumstances can lead us to this point, and it is what it is. But basically, coldly passive would be like, the child does whatever they want when they want. I don't even know where they are. I don't know who they are. I
Hmm.
don't care to know. I've got my own stuff going on. The coldly authoritarian parent I always describe as the Von Trapp dad from Sound of Music, if you've ever seen it. Like, got the whistle. I was mentioning to you when we spoke before too that there's all kinds of labels for this specific parenting philosophy: the intensive parent, the tiger mom, and the list goes on and on and on. People are strangely very proud of this parenting philosophy if they adhere
Hmm.
to it. They feel like, I run a tight ship. I have control over this household. I have control over my kids. And that makes me feel very successful as a parent. Like they respect me. Although what's really happening is a lot of pent up resentment, a lot of fear based conditioning, our children performing for us. We're conditioning them basically to just please and impress, and actually develop really bad codependent patterns and habits where
Mm.
they prioritize the needs and desires of other people before their own. In fact, it gets to the point sometimes in this particular philosophy where the child can no longer even identify their own needs or
Mm.
desires or intrinsic motivations, because for safety reasons they have had to outsource those. But coldly authoritarian parenting can be quite effective for the old school, again, desire for control. You can often get kids to do or be whatever you want them to do or be if they are afraid of you or afraid of you not loving them. But we'll
Right.
get into that later on, I'm sure. The next to the warm side, which feels a little bit better, where we're not using as much punitive measure, right? Or at least we don't think we are. This is where it gets so interesting, because
Mm.
warmly passive parents are often the friend, the one that's like, yeah, like I always reference this example of a dear friend of mine that I had whose mom would call him out of school to go skateboard. Like, if the weather was really nice and he just didn't want to go, she'd be like, okay, yeah, I'll call the school. You have a good day. And like, had no idea where he was. And they have a very warm relationship, but it's not the relationship that I personally would advocate for people to have, where there's this mutual respect, this desire to be like the parent and to be influenced by them. I always refer to my favorite author on parenting's quote, "Be the hero you wish to see in your kids," is something that Rosalind Ross says.
Mm.
So although the warmly passive parent technically on the surface has a warmer relationship and relation to the child, it's not the kind of relationship dynamic that we ultimately crave mutually as parents and for our children. Moving from there, though, we have the warmly authoritarian parent, which is typically idolized as the best methodology for raising children. This is what I refer to as the Disney Channel mom, like the perfect. I always say, what's his name? I don't think it's John Stamos. Who's the guy that plays the dad in Full House? They know what's best for you, and they tell you, "I love you, but I have to do X, Y, or Z, insert different subconsciously manipulative tactics here. This could be subtle shame, like you should have known better, you know better, you are this, that, and the other, like how could you do this, placing a lot of responsibility on our emotional state, the parent's emotional state, on the child. You're responsible for making me happy, for pleasing and impressing me. There's just so many different facets of the warmly authoritarian parent. But
Mm.
what's interesting is that they all four of these, for the most part, minus the passive one. So both of the authoritarian styles, whether it feels warm on the surface or feels very cold, are using the exact same behaviorist methodology, which is old old science based on rodents, right? This is where we took rats and said, wow, they do what we want them to do if we reward them enough, or if we punish them for doing what we don't want to see continue. And this is obviously unhealthy when we look at it just from an objective standpoint, because people aren't rodents.
Right.
Our children are not rats. And it's interesting for people to use this methodology and then hope that, okay, when our children turn 18, they will magically poof into human people that no longer need this sort of conditioning, when in reality, this conditioning stays with you for a lifetime, which is why we see people self-sabotage and not understand, again, their own needs, how to identify and express their needs in a healthy way, how to cope with disappointment, frustration, and all other types of life's ups and downs in a healthy way without shutting down or feeling shame, guilt, resentment. Again, it's such a deep concept and it goes on and on, but those are the four main foundational parenting philosophies that people work from, and they think those are the options, right? So of course, warmly authoritarian at least feels like the best option of the four. But interestingly enough, people raised in that way will say, I don't know why I have this subconscious resentment toward my parent, or why I'm uncomfortable around my parent as an adult person, or I feel like this ickiness around just my ability to be my authentic self, or to be transparent with my family, or to be able to express my needs clearly, without this feeling of like, oh, there's going to be some sort of shame or criticism or disapproval, right? And oftentimes I call this little t trauma. We
Mm.
can have big T and little t trauma, and they're all the same, right? They all weigh so heavily on us physically and emotionally and mentally. But the little t traumas are sometimes hard to identify. So people will think, well, I turned out just fine. It's fine. It's just part of life that you have to use these measures with your kids, or else they're going to be crazy, buck wild, and run all over you, and be entitled, spoiled. I mean, the list goes on and on of the judgments and preconceived notions that we have about raising children in any other way than the warmly authoritarian. But what I like to propose to parents is the fifth option. And this is what I teach, which is conscious, respectful parenting. And in this option, we view our child as a whole person who doesn't need manipulating. We can build a mutual relationship built on mutual trust, needs being met, understanding, compassion, and unconditional love that actually leads to real influence, right? So the parents that want this sense of control over the child, whether they like to acknowledge it or not, will actually end up having control just based on the relationship itself. I always mention to parents that struggle with this concept that, you wonder why you run a tight ship. You might even be like the fearful, benevolent dictator, the coldly authoritarian parent. And then when your child is 15, 16, 17, they go to their peers for insight, for information, for advice. They go to their
Mm.
peers when they make a mistake and they need help. They definitely don't want to come to you, right? Because they're afraid of you. They're afraid of what you might think, what you might say, that you won't love them anymore. They're not worthy of being around you, or, again, lovable by you. And that's obviously not what any parent wants, right? So
Right.
I think the thing to focus on is, okay, if control is what you want, relationship is where you have to begin. And you can't have relationship and ownership at the same time. If you're operating in the system of control, utilizing behaviorist tactics like manipulation, such as shame, guilt, coercion, actual punishments like isolating your children, hurting them physically, pretty obviously, is only something that would be done in an ownership dynamic, not a real relationship. In any other relationship dynamic, if somebody was hurting another person physically to try to teach them something, you would be pretty alarmed, right? Like that would be,
Right.
that's like a basic, and not even shaming parents that have done it. It's just an objective fact that this wouldn't be a healthy way to get what we want out of the scenario. In fact, people would often end relationship dynamics that are using that as a teaching tool. It's like, it's not, first of all, it's ineffective. It's not going to get you the results that you're hoping for. Maybe you can get somebody to be quiet, or to, again, to just not express themselves at all, shut down. But again, it's not building what you actually want to build. And yeah. So anyway, conscious parenting is just about really building that relationship, fostering something authentic, being able to be your authentic self, express your needs, and none of this, and also honoring your child's self, expression from the beginning, as well as their needs, honoring them as like a two-way street, collaborative effort. I look at my relationship with my kids as like we're a little mini team, and we're just all trying to make sure everybody's needs are met. And when they can't be met, coping with it in a normal way, normalizing whatever comes up. But it honestly, long term, leads to so much more of that, like more peace, more collaboration, honestly, more joy and ease in the day. And I think that's the main reason why I wanted to advocate for it from the beginning. I was like, wow, with this philosophy, even the hardest days as a parent are made so much easier than they would be, because no one is meant to be owned. We're just not meant to be operating in that system and in that way. And I can only imagine how much tension it's creating.
Mm.
First of all, from my own lived experience, being raised with that behaviorist methodology, I know what kind of tension it creates for the parents, for the children. And so I thought, I have to share this with as many parents as possible, with the hope that it brings more ease, more lightness, more peace, and authenticity to their days. So that is conscious parenting.
Wow. I think that's just a really amazing approach, because I really do like how you mentioned it's kind of like whole person parenting, like whole person from the parent's perspective, and then considering the whole person of the child. And that's so amazing, because I relate to you a lot, growing up feeling like I had to perform and be perfect. And if I was emotional, I had to keep it under control. And so many people, so many women I talk to now, especially who are now moms, say, I hardly know how to process my own emotions. Like, how am I supposed to teach my child what I don't even know how to do sometimes? Well, and again, obviously, it's not about having it perfect and setting this perfect example for your child, but just having that awareness, I feel like, has got to foster so much more of a loving and safe relationship, secure relationship. So I think that's really special. What has it looked like for you? Like, what does this approach look like in different stages? Because you've got a son who's older and you've got a little one too. And so you've like seen this play out for quite a while. So I'd love to hear from your experience how it plays out in the day to day.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. There's so many things there that you mentioned that I want to touch on. I'm like, but to address this first, conscious parenting in the day to day, you mentioned perfectionism. So that's the first one I wanted to get to. And I mentioned authenticity. Being authentic isn't being perfect. And I think sometimes when I share certain concepts within conscious parenting, people get it misconstrued, like, oh, she's just mom shaming. She's saying if you do X, Y, or Z, then you're a bad mom, or that you should feel bad about yourself if you do something differently. And I think that happy parents make the best parents,
Mm.
hands down. And I think that what our children yearn for the most from us is to know who our authentic self, to know our real self, to take down the mask, stop role playing, and just be who we are with them 24/7. So that kind of answers, first of all, yeah, just throw perfectionism out the window, because our children are like our mini life coaches sent to us by God. You know, it's like, okay,
Yes.
if you want to uncover, you know, I think that we need our trauma, we need the experiences that we have, to become the people that we're meant to be. You know, we're being set up for success if we look at it in this way, like our
Right.
experience is serving us and molding us, shaping us. Um, but then our children, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, sort of allow us, by unconditionally loving them, to pull back the layers of all of the conditioning of us thinking, for this reason you're not lovable, for that reason you're less lovable, for if you're doing this then you're not lovable anymore. When we love our children without conditions, we simultaneously love ourselves in that way, the way that we
Mm.
needed all along, but we sort of like re-love ourselves. And the common terminology for this is reparent ourselves. We sort of tell ourselves a new story through the love that we offer our children and the
Mm.
ultimate acceptance that we offer our children. In the day to day, this looks like, one, first of all, being able to acknowledge that, one, we're not operating in a system of control. So we just get to be. We have the freedom to just be with our children, talk to them like we would talk to any other person about real things in our real voice, being very curious about their perspective, their point of
Mm.
view, the littlest things. I made a video today about someone saying that, you know, their child screams at the top of their lungs all day long when they don't get what they want. And I love this quote that says, every day in a million small ways, our children ask us, do you see me? Do you hear me? Do I matter? And their behavior is a reflection of our response to those questions. And it's so
Wow.
beautiful. And it's so true. And I think that it's interesting for people to use that quote for themselves as well. As adult people, it doesn't change. In our marriage, you know, if there's tension, if there's a rupture in your relationship, 9 times out of 10, it's due to a lack of feeling seen, feeling heard, feeling like you matter to this other person, feeling like they have a deeper curiosity about you, that they have a wonderment about you and your point of view,
Mm.
that they want to know you, right? And that obviously there's a reflection of that response from them in your behavior as a spouse, as a person. You'll see that the results of how those questions are being answered come up in your behavior, whether you like it or not. I mean, and this
Mm.
could be, you know, it becomes very like, what's the word, internalized, or it could be very externalized. You could be a big reactor and say like, you're not doing this, or you're not that, and I need more, and I whatever, or you're so whatever, if you haven't learned a healthy way to communicate and express those needs. Or it could just be you shutting down, stonewalling, right? I love how this conversation, it's so beautiful to see the mirroring between our childhood and our adult relationships as well. Like, we might think that, okay, well, it's fine to raise our children in a behaviorist way, but it doesn't affect how I respond in my adult relationships. It's just how I am in
Mm.
my relationship with my children. But once you start to build awareness to all your responses, to all your interactions in your life, you'll notice, wow, I isolate myself when I feel bad, like when I feel shame in my relationship. Well, what's that? That's a timeout. That was somebody saying, when you were a
Mm.
child, you're not lovable. When you make a mistake, go away from me. Be alone
Wow.
in your hard time. I don't want to see you until you can be normal again, or until you can be what I want you to be. So oftentimes we'll see adult people become very reclusive and need to be alone, when they feel like they're not measuring up, when they're disappointing their
Mm.
partner, or even when their partner's disappointed them, in order to sort of put them in a metaphorical timeout. You go away from me, right? Like, I will be away from you. You're not worthy of my time, connection, and definitely not my love. It is not unconditional. It is conditional to your performance for me and with me and to me.
Mm.
And there's so many examples of how, again, our relationship with our children mirrors itself to all of our other relationships, which is one more reason why conscious parenting is so liberating, but also why it's so hard because we have years of unraveling and unlearning to do, basically, based on these habits and patterns that we've learned from infancy, right? Like we've been taught these things. I think there's a really cool study. It's cool, but it's also really sad, that says that babies as young as 6 months old already can discern that their parents don't like it when they cry. And
Wow.
yeah, I know, it's really fascinating because obviously we don't, especially as conscious parents, we try to normalize all the human experience. Like it's all right to be sad. That's a communicator. All the emotions are just communicating something to you, even if they're uncomfortable. It's like, if you're mad, well, okay, let's figure out, like, where is this coming from? What do we need to do differently? Same thing with our children. And this is still, I'm still answering that same question of the day-to-day life as a conscious parent. For me, is all about curiosity. We're refraining from judgment and criticism, which is apparently, just based on my comment sections alone, very easy to get into. I think it's where most parents are operating, and it's just not serving you to be judging your child and criticizing them and picking them apart constantly. Oh yeah, they wanted the purple cup instead of the pink cup. So ungrateful. Are you kidding me? This is ridiculous. Oh, I'm sorry, your water's too wet, right? And like, our children obviously are gonna be dysregulated at certain times of the day just based on their basic human needs, like hungry, sleepy, need more connection, right? But there are other things too where I'm like, this is just unfair. Like, our children are allowed to have preferences. I have preferences, and I'm 30.
Right.
I have shirts that I'm like, you know what? I liked this a week ago. I don't like it today. or I have like my favorite mug of all time. Like, if something happens to this mug that I love, I'll be so sad, and it'll be okay. It'll be okay, one, that I'm sad and disappointed about it, and also it'll be okay that it's broken or whatever happens or I lose it. But my point is that I guess I just normalize the human experience for my children from infancy, and I'm super curious about it from day one. Like, respecting their time, respecting their perspective from the moment they're born. Honestly, in the belly, I regard myself as a parent with them in my little belly. I'm like trying to make considerate choices, like most moms are. We're like thinking, okay, like, what's it like in there for them? Like, how am I feeding them, nourishing them? The basic things, right? It's making sure I'm limiting stress, whatever. But
Mm.
it really does start as early as that. Your pregnancy, just getting curious about the other's perspective. And some people are like, I just got a comment actually a couple of days ago that was like, we don't need our children to be the sun. It was an amazing analogy, but that just really fell short for me in terms of logic. Like, we don't need our children to be the sun and we rotate around them, and like, we don't need to cater to them, basically. And I'm like, I get what you're saying, but this still feels like you have the mindset that our children's end all be all is to like manipulate us and get one over on us. If our child is experiencing an uncomfortable emotional state, it doesn't feel good for them either. Like, if you're having a
Right.
response like that, it means that the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system, like, there's an imbalance where our body's literally going into fight, flight, fawn, or freeze due to needs, just basic needs. It doesn't have to be an indicator of character. Just meet the needs. Or if you can't meet the needs, right? Like, if the needs are something that is just like, okay, like, I can't, like, what? This doesn't make any sense, and I'm so sorry. Because our children are learning, and things like that will happen all the time. All the time. I know you have a 3-year-old, so you're in the thick
Yes.
of it. I think 3 is actually probably, a lot of people say the terrible 2s. I call them the tender 2s, but 3 for sure is it's a transformative time for our children developmentally.
Yes.
Where sometimes expressing those needs just does not, it's like, this is really challenging. It's so hard. But imagine how much harder it would be if you preface all of those needs with, first of all, not even regarding them as needs, but character flaws. Like, oh my God, my child is just so ungrateful. They're so annoying. They're so spoiled. They're just so entitled. I mean, this is like
Mm.
being placed on a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old. Where, how can we go like up from there? This is a really rough
Right.
start, right? And I say that my daughter Romy has a lot of proximity needs. She needs me to be very close 24/7, okay? And it is what it is. She's a very expressive baby. And so many people would interpret that as like, oh, is she a good baby or is she a bad baby? She's a bad baby. I'm like, there is no such thing, you know. It's just different types of
Right.
people with different needs, and it's our job as parents. It's why we become parents, to be available to our children. And this whole message that we've been sent in the last decade, and or actually several, probably last 50 years, I think, is when we've been sold this story of parenting needing to be convenient. Everything needs to be
Mm.
convenient. It's like, has to be simple, straightforward, to the point, easy peasy. And if it's not, you're doing it wrong, in fact.
Mm.
And so there's a bit of like, I guess, like developmental understanding as well, biology at play as a conscious parent, just trying to understand too what's appropriate, what's normal, getting back to the humanness of
Yeah.
our child in front of us. And in doing all of this and getting this deeper curiosity underway and this better well-rounded understanding of what's developmentally even appropriate, we can again constantly look back on our own experience with a lot of grace and be like, dang, like little Kate, you know, was the same. Like, you know, she was just as worthy as my sweet Romy. Or like, it's okay that she felt highly sensitive about things. And like, you know, I think it's just a constant learning and growing experience with our children when we surrender to it in that way, and lean into it in that way. It's also really, really fun because you actually get to know your child's true self, like their true essence. I always say, you know, God designed my kids perfectly, and I just have to let them sort of like flower before me, unfold before me, as
Mm.
opposed to me like, you know, fixating on like trying to sculpt and mold them to be what I think they're supposed to be and who I think they are supposed to sound like and look like. I think it's way better to simply foster this sense of trust, unconditional love, and acceptance from day one, this deep curiosity, and then again allow the rest to do the work by itself. Our children are so unique and special. And honestly, the Magda Gerber is one of my favorite authors, and she says, you know, observe more, do less. And this is another big proponent that you have to stick to as conscious parents. You know, some people might find that to be like, oh, is this like I'm just neglecting and ignoring my child? What do you mean do less? Like, it's more like stop doing the most is I kind of how I
Mm.
interpret it. A lot of the time we feel like we need to, again, just like do, perform, put on a happy face, like put on a role. And our children just need us to be our authentic self. And that's not, that doesn't always look the same at all, but it definitely is a much more peaceful existence.
Man, wow, that's beautiful. First of all, I love hearing just how you said the word liberating. And that to me is what comes to mind because, like you said, there really is this almost trend of, parenting is so inconvenient or that kind of thing. And it's so
It is.
heartbreaking.
It is.
I mean, yes, it definitely is not the most convenient in the
Absolutely.
world. It's so easy in our culture, I feel like, to forget that. Like, this is my priority. Yes, it's inconvenient. Yes, there are seasons where it requires extra energy, extra time, extra connection, conversations, digging in the dirt for another hour, like whatever it may be. But that's the point. And I love how you explain the liberation of it because, yeah, it's painful to deal with your own stuff. And I've seen that already in my 3-year-old. Like, there are things that he does that trigger me and I'm like, what is going on? Like, why did I respond that way? But I realize things about myself that were left unhealed that I still haven't processed about my childhood or my own trauma. And honestly, I was just talking to someone about this the other day. Like, it's always painful to process pain or to change. but the pain of healing and changing is always better than the pain of staying the same. And like you said, missing out on getting to know your child's true self and getting and not getting to experience them like really bloom and thrive and come alive. And I really think that's such a special way to approach this, because I just think, man, how many moms are, even with good intentions, so busy going throughout the day that they just miss it. They miss their kids living and becoming who they're going to be like right before us. And I mean, I'm guilty of it too. Like there are some days where I'm like, we just got stuff to get done. Like I can't stop and play with you for like another hour right now. Like, but I don't ever want to miss out on that. Like I don't want to get too busy trying to be the perfect mom or trying to be whatever, like I just want to be totally present. So I love what you teach on that. And especially this piece that you talk a lot about, which is creating the environment for them to flourish. What does that look like? What are some things that you have in place, maybe like practices as a family or in your relationship with your kids, that create that safe space for them to be themselves and for you to be yourself?
Yeah, so many great things there. I do want to touch really quickly on the fact that you mentioned that it's painful, right, to unearth a lot of this stuff regarding your own childhood and adolescent experience, and it can be painful for a lot of reasons. First of all, it can induce a lot of shame and guilt in us to even think about it, because we love our parents. There's
Right.
another really beautiful quote that says, when you shame and criticize your child, they don't stop loving you, they stop loving themselves. And
Mm,
I think that is very true. I think that we have a biological wiring to love and need connection from our parents. And so, regardless of what they offer to us, we're always loving, like we're always open to them. This is why you see so many unhealthy, almost like toxic relationship dynamics happen, where people are like, you know, it's very blatantly obvious that it's not a safe space for them to be in emotionally. They leave feeling exhausted, depleted, tapped out, criticized,
mm,
but they keep going back. They like, okay, well, it's my mom or it's my dad. I love them, and it is who I know who they are, but whatever. Well, first of all, it doesn't always have to be that way. There is potential for change. I just like have to throw that out for anybody that's
yes.
feeling, especially because if you're raising your child with this philosophy of conscious parenting, it can actually lead to some rifts that maybe weren't even necessarily there out in the open, for between you and your parents. But that's the first pain point, right? Is recognizing, oh, maybe my childhood wasn't exactly like what I painted as. Maybe it wasn't so perfect. Like maybe I do have some stuff. Man, that sucks. Like I don't like to acknowledge that. That hurts. And it feels like I'm a bad person because like do I think I'm better than my parents or something, or am I shaming my parent? But I like to remind people to come always from a place of compassion. um, our parents are, again, first of all, we need the experience that we have. That's why we have it. But second of all, like, our parents do the best that they can with what they know and what they have at the time.
Right.
And it's just not personal at all to objectively observe your experience and identify what that really was, and the good and bad things about it. It's important for your well-being and for your children's well-being. It's not, again, it has almost very little to do with your parents, because guess why they were the way that they were? Because of their parents, right? and
Right.
and societal conditioning. I mean, there's just so many things in there that's just not personal. And there was this beautiful, I don't know if you saw that little video. There was an audio of someone saying, if I could be born again, I would be born as the mom of my mom, and I would give her like all the love
Mm,
that she deserved, and all of the snuggles and kisses, and I would have
mm,
fun with her, play with her, I would get her these. And it makes me so emotional to even think about, because that is like what I wish, I could have offered my beautiful mom. Like I raised my children feeling like, oh, like every person deserves this kind of love and this kind of acceptance. And I
mm.
can't imagine what the world would be like for people to to receive that from infancy, just how beautiful of a world it could be. But again, it can be painful for that reason. Like, we feel like we're shaming or criticizing our parents, but come from a place of compassion. Think of that little video I just mentioned, and just remind yourself that it's not coming from a place of resentment. And resentment can happen, right? But I feel like the more and more uncovering you do, and the more reparenting work you do, the closer to compassion you get, even if you have a lot of resentment
Mm,
built up, even if there's like blatant abuse. Like, I mean, it can be extremes that you're working with, and still you can move toward compassion, because anytime you understand someone else, it's hard not to love them. Any person on the street,
right.
I swear, you could throw a rock, hit a person, and their story, you love them, because we're all human, right? And you recognize the humanness in one another. But the other thing I want to mention is that pain is exactly what I mentioned earlier. It's uncomfortable, but it's a communicator. It's
Mm,
like it's the gateway to feeling good. It's like, okay, in order to like, you don't want to have fake ease, right? That leads to actual disease, like sickness in the body,
mm,
tension, constant. I mean, if you hold on to, even if you don't feel like, let's say you don't want to acknowledge out in the open how you really feel about the experience you had as a child, um, you don't ever want, but you hold on to this like quiet resentment subconsciously. That sends a lot of messages to the people in your life. Every conversation you're going to have with your parents is going to reflect that. The relationship
mm.
that you have with yourself is a reflection of that. If that's going to be shown to your children as the example. I mean, there are just so many things that, again, like you said, it's much more painful not to resolve it in the long term than it is to say, hey, I need to acknowledge this now. Look at it as a communicator. Look at it as an opportunity, as opposed to something to run away from. And it's easier said than done, obviously. Some of this stuff can really stink it to resurface. But if you recognize, okay, I'm doing this from a place of compassion for my parents and for myself and for my own children, it can be a lot less painful and more, like, again, liberating. It can feel like, wow,
Mm.
oh my gosh, how much nicer it is to just have it out in the open, like, and not have anybody feel bad about it, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't want people to be scared of the reparenting process, or, the experience of being a conscious parent. I feel like I was so scared of being a surface level role playing parent, manipulating my child's every move, and with disapproving looks and approving looks, good girl, right? Like,
Mm,
you're being the person I want you to be. That felt more uncomfortable to me, living that reality, and basically continuing this performance, this phony sense of self. Like, okay, now I'm gonna put on the mom show and be what I think is the perfect mom, right? To me, that's way more perfectionism based and performance based than anything that I've ever experienced as a mom. So I just don't want
yeah.
anyone, I don't want people to have any fear, really. I just want you to have awareness and be able to discern for yourself what suits you. But for me, the pain part, I'm like, I was way more scared of that kind of pain, of the long-term effects of that as well, with my child and my children, than I was of the pain of, like, dang, this means I have to acknowledge the reality that was, certain
Yeah.
aspects of my upbringing. Which, by the way, also for people listening, like, I have the most amazing parents and the most amazing relationships with my parents and my siblings, and it's only gotten better and better with me having a very public platform talking about how to raise your children very differently than how I was raised. And that was absolutely triggering for my parents, and absolutely resulted in a lot of really hard scenarios and conversations. And again, like, today, my relationship with my mom especially is night and day from what it ever was. So
Wow.
again, the pain on one side resulted in just like so much healing and so much deeper connection that I think my mom always longed for
Mm,
sure, but for me too. So anyway, enough on that. You asked me what kind of environment I foster, basically, to allow conscious parenting to even be possible. And I think that everything starts and ends with you, right? The parents. That's why I always refer back to that quote, "Be the hero you wish to see in your kids," is my favorite quote ever, and like my mantra really as a mom. So everything starts with me, and I think, okay, even if like, let's say right now I'm in a season where I have to surrender to doing less, being less productive, which I was raised feeling like the more productive I am, the more I create, the more I produce, the more lovable I am. And I have a feeling
Yep,
you're the same way, because
I
even
am.
when you say, "Oh, I can't play with you right now because I have this to do and that to do," and we can get so preoccupied with our lovability and placing that in the arms of doing when our lovability is our birthright. It's in us. We are lovable, and worthy of love regardless of what we produce. There is the beauty of using our gifts, and needing to share them with the world, but we have to be careful not to place our value in doing those things. That can be a tricky little tightrope to walk. I totally feel that too. I get myself, again, I'm in a season right now where, for example, creating this environment of peace, stillness, and presence isn't always like easy. In fact, I don't know if that's ever easy if you're an American citizen. Like maybe if
Right.
you live in Spain or something, and like you're fortunate enough to be raised in a culture of slowness, of 4-hour dinners, everybody just
Oh,
relaxing,
yeah.
they don't bring the check. Like, we don't live in that society here in the USA. Just speaking from my lived experience, that we're not raised in a culture of presence, of slowness, of connection. It is very convenience, fast pace, fast cars, and freedom. We're just like, go, go, go. The more you can do, the better you are. And I think that starting with reframing your mindset around those basics is a really important piece of conscious parenting being possible. I just don't think it's doable with the opposite mindset. To actually connect to any person, you have to slow down. Like, you just have to. And this doesn't mean you have to be a sloth weirdo. Like, just be yourself, right? Like, my husband is a very ants in your pants, like fast-paced person. But that to me is not, like, people will say that's your personality. And I 100%, yes, there are all different types of people, all different types of personalities. But when I see that someone is naturally, quote unquote, naturally anxious and needs to go, 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 go all the time, to me, this seems like a trauma response. To me, this is someone that, because we're not born in our body, when we're in our body, if you're listening and you just take 30 seconds to, like, not even listen, not think of how you would respond, not think about something that we're saying here, but just get into your body and breathe and just be there. That is how we come into the world. We're not get up and go, we're scared, we got things to do. It's like that's the whole reason you and I have to surrender in this season, because we're like, oh my gosh, my child is forcing me to be present. My child wants me to slow down. My child needs me to lay here a little bit longer. Lay here? I can't lay. Like, there's things to do, things to be clean. But our children are saying, we were designed to be here right now. And again, surrendering to that is not always easy or convenient. And especially in today's economy, I feel like when eggs are $14 a dozen,
Yeah.
it's just literally not feasible for a lot of us, right? So it can feel very daunting. And I think that there's a lot to be said about all of it, but you can definitely kind of mold and shape your days around this philosophy and start to romanticize the little things. Open the curtains, open the blinds, let in the natural light. Don't even turn on your overhead lights. Just use the sunshine if you've got it. I live in Ohio, okay? I realize this isn't always like the best advice if you live in a gray place for 4 months out of the year, 5 months out of the year. It's just gray with brown sticks. But still, Open the curtains, open the blinds, let in the light, especially if you're a postpartum mom. I feel like just letting in real light, letting your eyes see it, getting in nature as much as possible. Like,
Mm.
we don't have patio furniture. Our table blew away. but but I literally take my kids outside and we eat on a quilt. We eat on the back, like, slab of whatever that is, like asphalt, on a rug. Like, just getting outside in nature and getting in touch with the things that naturally force you to slow down, I think is an amazing place to start. But if you're
Yeah.
like someone like I mentioned, where you're like, I have to work, like I can't be doing this. Okay, take a very good look at your day and become strategic. I know it's not what anybody wants to hear. Like, you have to plan. Like we've said a couple times, it's not convenient to be a mom. It's not convenient to be a conscious parent. It takes effort. It's a practice, and that's not always, again, like, fun to hear, because it's like we already have a million things to do. But if I tell you that this is going to create ease in your day, more slowness, more intentionality, then you might be like, okay, it's worth it, as opposed to the chaos of your day running you. That often happens just naturally, because when you have to meet other people's needs before you've even peed in the morning, it's like, yeah, that you're basically set up to fail. Like, the whole day is going to be crazy. So a couple of environmental things, other than just incorporating nature into your day, even in the smallest ways of like opening your windows, would be just minimizing the things that you have and having a place for everything. This is so tactical, and I rarely talk about stuff like this, but I think that, I mean, there's just actual scientific studies and research done on the mind and environment, and how they're so correlated. Like, the more chaotic our space, the more chaotic our mind. And
Yeah.
so the more simplified you can make your life in terms of things, possessions, toys, clutter, the more at peace you're going to feel internally, which is going to allow you to stay in a regulated state more often.
Mm.
And I think this is something that's just really overlooked, because people think, like, on the grand scheme of the conscious parenting scale, they're like, oh, I have to do all this reparenting work, I have to, like, read a bunch of books, it's really, it just boils down to you having a regulated nervous system, honestly, and allowing your child to also feel that sense of safety and security with you as much as possible. That is the epitome of conscious parenting, because when we feel it, when we have that regulated nervous system, when we don't have to adjust ourselves, it's so crazy how humans are designed, isn't it? It's like we're like always
Yes.
afraid for the next thing. And it could even be like your parents is like mad at you because you, I don't know, did whatever, and your like brain tells your body, my parents mad at me, they don't love me, they're not going to take care of me anymore, I'm going to die, I'm literally going to die, I'm just going to die now. I mean, that's like that's like the basic foundation of what's happening when we utilize behaviorist tactics and parenting
Mm.
philosophy. It's like so strange to me sometimes to think about it at such a simplified level. But if you can get yourself into a state of regulated nervous system as much as possible, all of this is going to be so much easier for you. No matter what kind of lifestyle you're living, that will benefit you and help you, especially if you are somebody who's extremely busy, working a full-time job, taking care of multiple children, a single parent. I was a single parent for a time, and I think that this is more important for you. You might dismiss it and be like, that's just not feasible for me. You don't know my life, Kate. You don't know my lifestyle. You don't know me. But I'm like, no, this is more important for you. The more chaos you've got going on in your life, the more busyness, the more noise, the more tools you need in place to create space,
Mm.
presence, quiet of the mind. These are the same people that are like, I can't meditate. What do you mean? Like, I have so many things going on in my mind at one time. I'm like, you need it the most. You need to sit
Yeah.
there. Just get into your body and just be there for a second, the way God intended. But yeah, the environment is key. So I'm really glad that you asked me that question. Ask yourself, Does this create more chaos in my mind or less? And if the answer is more, navigate how to eliminate that from your life.
Man, that's awesome. I'm over here like taking inventory of my whole life and making notes of like all the things. When we're done, I'm going to be like, okay, we're reevaluating everything. We're taking inventory. No, I love it though, because you're so right. Like there are so many. I mean, I'm even catching myself here like, oh, could I do that? Like, could I actually slow down? Like, what would it be like to live just with peace and not feeling like we're in a hurry? Like, I'm just that person. Like, I've just always been that person that's just, I feel like I have to do more. I feel like I have to, produce and perform or whatever. And it is so much of that undoing process. But the more I think about it, I'm like, oh my goodness, we literally can't lose anything from this. Like, there's nothing that we could really lose except maybe some events on our schedule, like it's just, it's worth the sacrifice. And I think as a busy mom or someone who feels like that urge to produce and perform constantly, like it's good to slow down. Like I need that. Like it's a good reminder, and that sacrifice is part of it, and sacrifice is worth it, because this is such a short season with our kids, and it's so easy to forget that. I feel like when you're just in the mundane day to day. But what you said about romanticizing the little things and just realizing that the time we're in now as parents is so special, and not to waste that. I really respect and appreciate that about what you teach. And I know that there's literally so much else we could talk about, but I don't want to keep this too long. But I do have a couple more questions if you don't mind.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I'm curious because I'm sure this is something you get asked a lot, but how do you handle the hard stuff if you see, or like discipline, for example?
Yeah.
What would something like that look like as a conscious
That's a
parent?
great question. So I regard discipline like the word disciple, which is to teach, to
Wow, I
guide
love that.
in a calm, confident way. And look, it's not always calm and confident, okay? I also get dysregulated. I also have triggers. I also was raised in a household where, like that, it didn't look this way. It wasn't done this way. And again, a lot of environmental factors like being a single mom, like having monetary stress of just life things. Like, I mean, there have just been so many different circumstances in my life as a parent that have led me to not show up as the parent that I wanted to be, or not respond in a way that I know how to respond, which is way worse when you're a conscious parent. Let me tell you, it never feels good to be dysregulated. Like I was saying, like your kids don't
Hmm.
want to be in a dysregulated state as much as you don't want to be in a dysregulated state. It doesn't feel good for the body. It's not how we're meant to operate. It's meant to operate that way when we're being chased by a bear. Like, so we don't need to be doing that on like a Tuesday at noon. To think like that has something to say about your character or your child's character is just goofy. Okay, so that mindset is just not helping you. It's not serving you. It's not going to make you have a better relationship with your child. And it's also not going to improve behavior, because when it comes to discipline, what we need to do is first of all assess met and unmet needs so that we stay away from this red space, the danger zone of like, I'm going to be reactive. I'm not going to be an actor in my life. I'm going to be a reactor. I'm going to react to this scenario. And there are certain things for me, like messes are a really big trigger. Feeling like I can't do the work that I want to do. I have so much passion about what I do, and I want to help so many people. And just to make a TikTok video, it's probably going to get interrupted at least 16 times. Like, I'm not even exaggerating. And like by the 14th time, I'm like, okay, maybe I just give up. I don't know. Like, maybe I should just never do this again. Like, I don't know. Maybe I just give up on all of my dreams, like, and I can tell myself a story, but that's because a large part of my identity and my self-value is based on my performance, like what I create and produce and how fast I do it. And there's so many other people now that talk about this. And I tell myself a story of like, oh, but like I should probably have grown twice as fast. Like, if only I would have actually been consistent. Kate, this is the inner critical parent talking. Okay. It's not, this is the voice of the enemy. Okay. And
Yep.
you don't, that's going to lead to the responses that you don't want. And some people confuse this with discipline. with
Mm.
casting this shame on our children. You never let me get anything done. That's enough. You're gonna go over here, or like, stop it, yelling, being punitive. That's not teaching anything about any behavior that we're seeing. It's teaching
Mm.
about the relationship between you and the child. The child's now getting an understanding of, one, how to respond to life when it's hard, when things are tricky, and you need to navigate your time better. You need to navigate the situation in a different way. People have differences. So our child's learning that, okay, how do we respond to difficult scenarios like this? Yelling,
Mm.
upset, slamming things, being rough. Um, and it's so upsetting, because again, we're just really led astray as vulnerable mothers and fathers. I think we are just, one, taught by our experience that we've had with our own caregivers, that this is just like the way you have to do it, because children do respond to fear. They do respond to being afraid of you, or being afraid that you don't love them. They'll totally do, usually, at least in the short term, what you want them to do if you make them
Yeah.
scared enough, or scared of losing something that they like, or scared of, again, losing your love. But is that what we really want to teach? I mean,
Mm.
especially if we want to see the behavior shift long term, if we want our children to have an understanding of different social dynamics, and like what's socially appropriate, for example, we don't want to teach them like something completely outside of the very subject that they're struggling with.
Yeah.
Okay, so like, for example, a child hits you or hits another person. First of all, how goofy is it to hit them to teach them not to hit? This is very backward, people. And if anything, sometimes people will say, well, I'm the parent, and
Mm.
I like, that's what we need to do to teach them not to hit, or not to do, insert whatever behavior here. Well, all we're teaching them is that when you're bigger than someone else, it's okay to hurt them. When you make a
Mm.
mistake, it's okay for someone to hurt you. And you're deserving of this. You should feel the shame, and feel like, for one, you're definitely not worthy of unconditional love. When you make a mistake, it's actually okay for me to physically abuse you, like hurt your body. And I think that it's so interesting, again, because most parents don't want, the long-term goal for them is not for their children to enter into relationships that mirror that, where like, you wouldn't
Yeah.
want your daughter to be like, well, I made a mistake, it's okay for my husband to hit me, I deserve it, I did a bad thing, like I did something that he doesn't approve of, or I said something he doesn't approve of, so he should probably hit me. Or just hit you in other ways, like
Mm.
hurt you emotionally, and put you down. I think, again, these things carry with us for the long term. So for me,
Yeah.
discipline in the moment is focused on connection. I want to understand the behavior. This goes all the way back to having a deeper knowledge of what's developmentally appropriate. Hitting, for example, if I asked a room of 500 people, 5,000 people with babies 1 to 5 years old, have you ever been hit by your child? Every single person would raise their hand. This is a fight or flight response. The fight response, specifically, our
Mm.
child is so dysregulated, right? Their little body can't handle the stress that they're enduring. And this could just be due to basic disappointment. They don't know how to process this. Their prefrontal cortex is just not ready to say, okay, don't need to hit anybody, but we probably shouldn't have ice cream at 9 a.m. It's gonna be okay. We're gonna have it at a different time in the day. Like, they just are not there developmentally, and so their body in a stress state can hit. This isn't something for us to take personally. We can absolutely say, "Ow, like that hurts. I'm not gonna let you hit me," or "Hey, maybe we need a change of scenery, change of environment." I need to help you co-regulate, basically. Like, I need to model for you what it looks like to stay regulated in a stress state like this. It's all about modeling and teaching. There are going to be times where things are really, really challenging, and we see behavior from our children that makes us really deeply uncomfortable and triggered, right? I think a lot of the time parents will say things to me like, well, my child's literally laughing when they do something after I tell them to stop. Like they're kicking the table and I say, please stop kicking the table, Jeffrey. And then they keep kicking it and then they're laughing at me. Like and I'm like, okay, this is, again, not a real laugh. This is like stress laughing. There's tension in the body that's resulting in this. What are the basic human needs and need met here? This is, again, going back to curiosity. And it's been really interesting to watch my husband gather this information and insight in real time with my son Donovan. Like, because when we met, I was a single mom and Donovan was 2 years old. And obviously, it's not easy to become a parent overnight with anyone, let alone me, someone that has a lot of very, very specific beliefs around how you should do things, right? And so my poor husband was like, really thrown into the fire. But it's been so wonderful to watch him in real time make adjustments to just not even his interactions, because that's very different, but the way he perceives behavior as a real communicator. I mean, in the past, it was, this is a communication of who he is, Donovan, this 3-year-old little boy, or this 2.5-year-old little boy, or this 4-year-old or 5-year-old. Now it's, this is a communication of something that this little boy needs, and how do we meet that need? And if we can't meet the need, how do we normalize the feelings that are happening here? So, it used to be, there would be a lot of shame. There would be a lot of criticism, like saying things like, oh, he's just defiant. Like, oh, he doesn't listen to me, or he doesn't this, and then it turned into, I think he's just tired. I think he's really tired. Or it'd be like, oh, shoot, he hasn't had lunch. It's 2. Like, it's so amazing for me to watch this happen, where the whole time, obviously, in my head, I'm like, he's really exhausted. Okay, he's really hungry. He hasn't eaten and it's 2:00, and that's always my stream of consciousness. But to watch someone else who has this conditioning, probably even more extreme than mine, of shame and criticism being the answer, to say, it's just a communicator. Behavior is literally just telling me something, and our children don't want to behave badly, quote unquote. We might think they do if we get into that headspace of like criticism and judgment, but believe it or not, our children want to be the good people that they are. They want to make good choices. They want to be at peace, because again, it does not feel good in our bodies to be dysregulated, to be stomping, to be scowling, to be upset, to be angry, frustrated. It doesn't feel good in our bodies. Our children don't like operating there just as much as we don't like operating there. So when it comes to teaching them how to handle those moments where they're upset, frustrated, angry, disappointed, I like to just look at the anger iceberg, is what I call it. And underneath anger is like a million different things that the child could be experiencing: confusion, hurt, a lack of connection, insecurity. The list goes on and on. And the more curious you can get about your child's experience, the less and less you start to see these kind of behaviors show up. And I hate getting into that like fix it Felix mindset of like, it's all just to fix it. That's why we're looking at the anger iceberg, so we can prevent this behavior moving forward. And it's like, no. First of all, we just need to normalize the whole range of human emotions. They're important. They tell us a story about what we need to do differently. If our child is constantly, I get people, it's a common thing for parents to say, what is going on with my child at 4 p.m.? Why is it that like 4:30, like they're completely fine? I'm like, okay, well, obviously there's a couple things. Like, first of all, for most children, as soon as this nap is dropped, then you're in that evil zone where like they can't take a nap because then they won't go to sleep at the time, but then you have to keep them awake until the bedtime, and they're so exhausted. Their poor little body just can't do much more. And for that, I'm like, get outside, save yourselves, because nature heals all. But honestly, I think it's so interesting though that they'll say like, oh, this happens at the same time, and I'm like, well, do you watch TV? Do they watch screens, or do they use screens at the same time every day? Yes. Okay. Well, this is an indication of just being overstimulated. Or do
Mm.
you have environmental things going on in the household? Like, did you have a new baby recently? Are you pregnant and expecting? How is your marriage? I mean, we are energetically connected, our families, and it's easy to overlook that and just simply judge the child and have these very unrealistic expectations for them that, by the way, we don't hold ourselves to. We don't hold ourselves to the
Mm.
same standard. We have tantrums all the time, even the small ones. Have you ever tried to like log into like your Amazon Prime account on your TV? You've logged in on the other TV, but you forgot you haven't logged in on this TV. And so you have to like use the remote to type in every letter of your email address. And then when you finally finish it, you realize there was like a typo, you missed the A, and then you have to like go back and then you do it again. Okay, I'm sorry, but like no normal person, I'm a very chill person, and that makes me feel, I'm like, oh my gosh, like honestly, I cannot. I just think it's interesting to put like 50 people to that task and like see all their different responses and then hold them to the same standards that we hold a 2.5-year-old to in terms of their behavior
Mm.
and response to that. But that level of frustration happens for them all day long, right? Like, so I think when it comes to discipline, it's like so many answers to the same question, but it's all about modeling. It's all about curiosity, trying to figure out where the behavior is actually coming from, as opposed to like trying to teach in a moment when our child's dysregulated. It just doesn't one happen. There's no learning to be done. If you can lecture your dysregulated flailing child all you want, but their brain isn't in a space to learn from you, one. So the best thing that you can do to set yourself up for success is to, one, not take the behavior personally, get very curious about it, do what you can to get your child into the best setup for getting into a more regulated state, but also accept it. Like I look at it like a little storm passing. We need to process emotions. I mean,
Mm.
our bodies are designed so beautifully to handle and process stress and joy, all of it.
Mm.
And there's systems in place. Even if your child is laying on the ground, this is called flatlining, actually. Our child is intrinsically, they're intuitively getting themselves into a more regulated state. This is where they can,
Mm.
just like actually regulate themselves in terms of their heart rate, in terms of their blood pressure. And it's
Wow.
literally like, they're just like, I have nothing left, I must lay. Like, it's too much for my little body. And they just intuitively do this. And so if we were to judge our children, though, and start from this place of shame and criticism, there's no way we would even learn that about them. We would already just be, again, set up to fail. So getting that deep curiosity, removing our children from an environment that is not serving them, setting them up for success in terms of things that are going to lead to tension and upsets and this sort of behavior that we're like, oh, that is not comfy at all. That is not fun. But then also when something does happen, once they're regulated again and we've been their anchor through the storm, like their safe space to land, right? Even if you're like, ha, ha, dodge, it's fine. Like, I'm here. Okay, like you can't hit me. You can't hit me. Remaining like the calm, objective, confident guide. Then we can teach. Then we can say,
Mm.
so what can we do next time? What can we do differently? But again, when you're talking to like a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, some of this stuff, it's like they don't want to be doing that. They know. That's why children, when they are regulated, aren't throwing things at people,
Yeah.
aren't hitting you, right? They don't want to be doing that. I think having that basic understanding really helps with discipline, but discipline starts with you. What do you teach through your doing every single day? How do you respond to the remote scenarios, to driving in the car, to just basic disappointment and frustration that life throws your way? How do you respond? This is really, really important. And oftentimes it's very reflective when we look at how our children respond as well. And sometimes not. I'm not really a big hitter or kicker. And my son has 100% hit and kicked. It is what it is. This is just a part of our child's, again, just biological wiring and development.
Wow. I am just like sitting on the edge of my seat. I'm like, this is so, so, so good. I don't want to stop this conversation. But really quick before we go, I'd love to hear, is there anything you just want to say to the moms who are listening?
I would love to tell you that you're, first of all, I'm like hugging you so hard. Like, seriously, I just think that mamas are the, it's like everybody talks about how they're underappreciated and underrated and whatever, but it's really true. It's really true that, like, when I think I remember somebody once joking, like, you gave birth to me, you carried me, you raised me, you did every this stuff, and here's a bouquet of flowers, right? Like on Mother's Day. And what's amazing about moms is that they love it. They don't do it for any gift, for any recognition, and sometimes we can fail to recognize even ourselves. Like, not only do we not care about getting recognized, and we don't even really, we wouldn't change a thing regardless of the recognition that we get. We actually cut ourselves down all the time in the way that we're doing things and how we could be better, or how like we messed up, or like we did this wrong, or like we know better. And like, again, I would extend just a really, really warm hug and like so much love to every mom, and just to tell you that you're enough, like, and that this belief that you're not doing enough, that you aren't enough, is just, one, not true, but also you are the dream mom to your kids. No one could ever replace you or do what you do. Like I said, when we first started, what our kids yearn for is the most authentic version of you. They want to see you shine. They want to see you happy. They want to see you, just living your best life with them, and modeling for them the beauty of life, enjoying life. And I think that the further we get from criticizing and shaming ourselves in the job that we do, and starting to recognize, like, dang, like, I am so full of love, like, and I overpour onto everyone, and I am meeting so many people's needs right now, and I'm amazing. Like, I can't believe I do this, and I can't believe, like, I did that. Like, I gave birth, and like I have these beautiful children, and I think you should just really take pride in what you're cultivating, and just give yourself a quick pat on the back and a little hug, and tell yourself, like, you are doing an amazing job. You really are. And you are so lovable and so worthy of love. And I would also tell you, with that in mind, to take really as good of care of yourself as you possibly can, to set yourself up for success. I think so often we go undernourished. We go undernourished, not just physically, but in what we feed our minds, and both what we don't feed it and what we do feed it. Watch what you consume. Watch how it makes you feel. And I think that those are some of the best ways that you can be, again, in that more regulated state, feel more empowered as a mom, feel more empowered as a wife, a partner, a friend, a sister. And again, that's how you're going to be the hero you wish to see in your kids.
Oh, I love that so much. I could honestly just sit here with you for days and continue talking about this. It's so, so good. It's so good. And you guys, we literally have just scratched the surface today. And so Kait has so many other resources that would be amazing if you want to keep learning about this or continue the conversation with her. So before we go, Kait, can you just tell everybody where they can connect with you, learn more about this, and get a hold of your resources?
Yes, thank you so much. You can go check out, I have so much free work available. My YouTube channel is really where it all began. So that's a great wealth of information there. It's just the Mellow Mama. My Instagram and TikTok are also the Mellow Mama. My TikTok, I think, has an underscore at the end. Again, just like a lot of great free information for you to have this bigger mindset shift. And there's also a lot of nuance in there for helpful stuff, like when it comes to the less big picture approaches to discipline, and just little things, again, that you're going to deal with on the day to day with your children and your inner child, and also all the people in your life that you love as you start to embark on this more conscious lifestyle. You can go to my website, www.themellowmama.org, and I've got my online course there. It's it's truly a great streamlined way to do all of this work in one place, as opposed to like, okay, I got to read this book and then I'll read that book and then oh my god, my kid is 7. It's like I feel like the course is like you could just listen to it casually, just like you would a podcast. Some really, really great transformative work in there. It's not just parenting, but it's also going to be focused on the reparenting process. I have some really exciting updates, in fact, that are coming next month. I think my husband might be featured in them, because I think it's a little hard to teach men. I think men sometimes learn best from other men. So that's going to be really exciting if you have a husband that's, maybe you've aligned with this conversation, but you're like, I know he's not going to. I think that might be really helpful. We just talked to my dad today about maybe him being playing a role in that conversation as well as the granddad. I think it's just going to be so awesome what we have to offer. So check out the course. I think, again, it's a really worthwhile investment, not just for the short term, but for the long term, to have more peace and authenticity in your life and relationships. I think that's it. Oh yeah, I have a couple of books too, like not actual, my book isn't finished, but I've got like an activities book. If you're somebody that's like, I need something to do with my kids, it's literally called Something to Do. It's so fun. I made it with my friend Bree, and it's a really nice little coffee table book. If you ever feel like, I want independent play to be fostered for my kids, but I need to give them a little direction. I think it's a really awesome little book. It's beautiful. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Just look up the Mellow Mama and you'll find me.
Yeah, you guys, I'll make sure everything is linked below so you can go connect and grab all those resources. Seriously, like I have just already learned so much, not only from this conversation, but just from everything that Kait creates. It really is so beautiful and so encouraging as well. So Kait, I really can't thank you enough for being here and for sharing your own story, and then also what you've learned in your journey as a mom. I just really look up to you and admire and appreciate what you're doing for other moms and families. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so much fun.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to tune into another episode of the Byword Show. I love having you here, and I'm so thankful for your support. Don't forget to share a screenshot of this episode to let me know you were here. I can't wait to talk again soon, but in the meantime, be sure to come hang out with me on Instagram, and remember, I am cheering you on.